I'm Ephraim. Today I'm showing you all a movie about some great women from the Connecticut and surrounding area. And unfortunately there's going to be some stories involved that might make you sad. But when we get to the end of those sad stories, our goal is to provide some answers so that those sad stories don't happen again. Correct? Who knows what a will is? Correct. It's a document that you put together before you die. What's going to happen to our assets? And our assets is our stuff. And so, if something were to happen to one of you right now, I want to know whose book bag I'm getting, whose video games I'm going to be keeping. Are you going to leave it to me, to your families, to your siblings? Or you're going to give it away to your friends, okay? I have a car, and so if I want to leave my car to someone when I'm gone, to you, of course. Or if I want to leave my art to someone when I'm gone. Or my computer to someone when I'm gone, okay? And so in these stories that we're about to watch, some of these people passed away and they didn't have wills. And so you're going to learn about what can happen. And then you've got this great stuff from the Connecticut Museum of
Culture and History.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Ephraim.
When the kids came in, they learned about Rita Hester, how she was a black trans woman from Hartford. Okay. Most of them already knew what being transgender was. And so they realized that she inspired a national memorial. And that we rose this flag to bring awareness to black trans issues. And then we brought these flags here as well to show that this is not the first time that this has been done. Right. Because there's always inter-community discourse. Right. And so this is Savannah's obituary, the one that's not affirming. And so the first thing I learned is that it would be more productive to get a trust, because a trust is activated while you're living. Okay? It's something that doesn't go through probate, and we'll get to that in a minute. A will is only taking effect after you die. And so there's still a little bit of hesitation there, right? Because once you're gone, it's out of your control. Right? And so you have a trust, a will, and then you have a living will, okay? Which is usually medical related for someone to act on your behalf. A living will, if I'm maybe in a medical accident, or maybe I can't speak for myself, maybe I'm not mobile, it tends to be in the medical field, and that's where you can have someone designated to act on your behalf legally, all right? And so the next thing I'm going to hop into is an amendment. Once you've decided which avenue that you're going to take with all these different things, you want to update your information every 3 years or so, because life always changes. Do you have dependents? A dependent is someone who relies on another person as their primary source of income. That's what they say, right? Which could include a spouse, partner, a child, grandchild, a parent, anyone who depends on you for care. That's how it's defined. But if one of these things were to go through probate, the government looks at it as to who was related to you by blood. And so when we looked at the film that we just saw today, there could be some issues with that, right? Because not everyone who is blood related to us is supportive of us. And so my first question for you today is, all lost for someone like Savannah in that case. Would a will have prevented what happened to Savannah, who was memorialized in the opposite gender?
When you get your trust, there is a will in your trust still. There's stuff that still happens after death. And that deals with your funeral, your pronouns, all those things go into that will process. And the trust, a trust is you're funding something. So if you have a house, say you have a partner, you're not married, you have a house, you guys go into a trust together, then you're not fighting with somebody. What happens typically is before people could get married, my wife and I got married up here, but we were from Florida. So we went back to Florida, so we had all of our documents done when we went back, and we knew we were having a child. So we made sure everything was in order. Our will, our living will, your living will is actually what you want to happen to you if you basically are at that moment of maybe a coma or something like something horrible has happened.
Gotcha.
So if you don't want to be resuscitated and you want a DNR and you put that in, that's your living will. That's what they ask for when you go get a surgery or a procedure. Do you have your documents? And they're wanting to know what they do with you when that moment comes. A health proxy, that's another document as well. That's
What is it?
a health proxy.
A health proxy.
That's when you give someone the ability to make medical decisions for you. And that's what most of us did prior to being able to get married, or when civil unions weren't.
And so we fought for queer marriage, but if we had trust and wills, could that have all been avoided?
Yes, kind of.
Okay.
Everything, I'm a lawyer, so it's going to say it depends or
Oh,
potentially.
right. Always the technicality there.
Wills are regulated by the state in which you're in. It's not a federal thing. So if I have a will in Montana and a will in Connecticut, you have to decide where did I go? Where was my primary residence? And that's the state that's going to take you into probate and reach your will based on all of those things. So we're in Connecticut now. We go through the will process. I have like a little questionnaire that I usually give to people. Your name, your preferred name, your dependents, and then who do you want to leave things to? Now, typically, I'm usually either dealing with a single person or someone who's married. So when that happens, I'm not dealing with what we would say is chosen family. I'm dealing with people who have someone who it's going to naturally go down to whether they have a will or not. If you don't have a will and you're married, that's the difference that we're talking about. If you don't have a will and you're married, it's just going to move on to your spouse and your children. Yeah, it's called the testation. So that's going to happen. But
even if you do have a will, my mother and my father were 25 years different, and my mother was actually younger. She had a will, and when she passed, her will is null and void. It automatically went to my father.
it just goes.
It went to my father.
So that's what you say. You go, very specific stuff comes out of your will. So you'll say, I want this jewelry, this piece to go to my cousin Cindy. And then you'll say residual, and your residual usually goes to your father, the children, those sorts of things. So you have very specific things in your will.
If one of these things were to go through probate, the government looks at it as to who was related to you by blood. And so when we looked at the film that we just saw today, there could be some issues with that, right? Because not everyone who is blood related to us is supportive of us. And so my first question for you today is, all lost for someone like Savannah in that case?
This is a room full of all of her people who have loved her entire life. And this bigot comes in and says, oh, a League of Their Own is here. Now he's taken away from that moment of mourning for all of us. So, and when they wrote her obituary, it was whitewashed. It was glossed over. Like she didn't have this life of traveling and all her best friends who should have been mentioned in there, who she spent the majority of her time, it just says left whatever sibling and the parents, you know what I mean? So I wrote in an extra note for you guys of, if you want someone to be in there, then pre-write your obituary. And it sounds morbid. It sounds morbid, but it's so true when you're thinking about, especially the political situation we're in right now. Pre-write it, and it becomes an attachment to your will. And I wanted to make sure I said that because it's so important when you're thinking about how you want your legacy after and how you are seen and what people read about you, because your obituary is public, your will be public, and if you state those things, then people will know. Once that goes through probate, everything, who you're leaving stuff to, that's the trust, on the other hand, is a lot more private. But when I think of trust, and it's not for rich people, but when you have to have something to fund it, you have to have something that goes in to start the trust. It can't just be sitting there and you have this trust, because if you haven't funded with anything, you can't give it to anyone. You can't give it to yourself if it's a revocable trust, which is you're most likely the trustee at that point, and you pay your house. You put your house under.
Let's hop into that. And so how much am I spending for a will and a trust? Because I showed up with my $150, $150, because I heard something over the phone about $150, and I show up, and I got through the whole will process, and I was excited, ready to notarize it, and she said it was $500, and I said, oops, ouchie.
Yeah.
I will come back another time, because that $150 was just the consultant fee.
Yeah.
And so, in the estate planning industry, I know we have legal aid and other things, but how accessible would it be?
When friends ask me to do something, I usually do that for like $400, $500. So I do that. But a trust.
Is there a payment plan?
Oh, of course.
A
But this is what I'm going to say. I'm going to say this in a second. Give me a second. I'm giving you the realistic. If you're not going to come to me or someone else or whomever, and you're going to go and you're just going to call a lawyer, it's going to be $500+ just for that. Because once you start adding those other documents, all we have, our commodity, and time is our commodity. That's how we make our money as attorneys. Now, a trust can range from anywhere from $1,000 to $6,000 because it's a complexity. What are you putting in this trust? What are you trying to get out of this trust? There are people, you see, when you're doing your research, there are tax breaks that come. You know, when you're passing down a large sum of money and what that looks like. When you're gifting money, in order for you not to have any sort of tax implications, every person can give up to about $13,000 a year, no tax implications. So you could go back and forth and you can put that, you know. The problem with a will is when you say, I'm leaving this to whatever and my residual here, then that goes just directly. It goes directly outward. A trust, you still have this odd control over how your money is spent. This trust is going to benefit my children for medical and educational purposes, and that's what I'm going to pay.
So when we talk about that whole generational wealth thing, trust. The Connecticut Museum of Culture and History here. And so, has anyone ever said we're going to leave our money with the museum?
Oh yeah, the museum would not exist if we had not had people leave us substantial endowments that enable us to, I mean, we're going to turn 200 years old next year, and that is absolutely generational wealth that people chose to share with us.
So that's something you can do.
When people are leaving their stuff to charities, that's for tax implications.
Gotcha. So we went over chosen family, maybe you have a legal guardian, foster parents, godparents, pets. Okay, that's something that you can include in your wills. Where does one store their will? Now I was told that if I go to the bank, I can leave it in a safety deposit box, or I can stash it at a safe place at home. How is someone going to know my information? And so you have to tell someone that you have a will.
Yep, leave it in 3 places. You leave it one by your side, like maybe in your next to your bed. One with, hopefully, if you get it done by an attorney, with your attorney, and one you can put in a safety deposit box. I always give 3 copies. Put these where you want to put them. Put it in your file cabinet. Put it in whatever.
Okay.
Wait, bedside, attorney, deposit.
Yeah, and some people say don't leave in a deposit box because then you have to go through people trying to get into your deposit box. But if it's a parent or your spouse, and your spouse will know, can get into that. But if it's something where you're not a spouse or someone who is next of kin, then another option.
Yeah, so with the whole like leaving it with the attorney thing, somebody has to then know that they're your attorney, right? But then also, let's talk about retainer fees, because I know that's I don't have a will, and it's because back when we were trying to do it, we had the $200 consultation, and then they were like, now this could be a $1,000 retainer, and we went, ha, and then we moved to Connecticut.
People hide wills. They all of a sudden found Aretha Franklin's will, and I think like a year later, maybe something.
Oh, they said they found one of her wills?
I think they found it. You know what I'm saying? So that's why it has to. You want to leave it with, your bedside, a trusted person, and then somewhere safe, a third. But I always give you 3 copies, and that's your choice on how you do it. And I always keep a copy.
And you put them in those 3 spots.
Yeah, and there are 3, and I give 3 original copies. So you sign 3 original copies, so there's no question.
Now, some people were worried about, well, I don't have any money, I don't have any assets, and so here are some things I wrote down, since I'm planning a funeral currently. you might want to put where who's going to have your phone, who's going to have your pictures, your videos, your electronics, your hard drives. I saw a will where someone was going to take over their social media. Anything with sentimental value, maybe you have ashes of other families and relatives and loved ones. They might be caring for those ashes. Art, if you have music out there that, you know, different things. The family Bible. I put obituary in case you might want to write your obituary. Maybe donations, like we said with the museums and different things. And so that was just one of the things I wanted to mention about, you know, people saying that, you know, I don't need a will, I don't have anything, but then maybe you might.
If you're a person, you have something. You have to believe that there's something that's valuable to you as a person that you would like to pass on. And I always think everyone should have a will. I've, you know, going through it myself, going obviously to law school, but then having to be married at a time where it wasn't recognized everywhere, traveling, we like to travel, we have a baby, like all these things are happening. So we literally had our documents in the baby bag everywhere we went. So if there was one time, because there was a cruise that happened that came into Miami and the birth mother died, they weren't married at that point because it wasn't recognized, and then the child got put in the system off of a family cruise. So those are the types of things that you want to make sure, you know, marriage is a choice. I will say that. Marriage is a choice. You can believe in it or you can't believe in it. Marriage is a legal contract though, and it has benefits, whether that be financial benefits or legal, like protective benefits. Always remember that. Don't go randomly get married to anyone. But remember that in your relationships, and you decide that on your own. But anybody who always is like, oh, I've been with this person for 25 years, what are we going to be married for? And it was because our community was so used to not having the opportunity, figuring it out.
Right.
And then having these horror stories about somebody's parents coming in and taking the house.
Right. But if they had living wills and different things,
All those different
all that
things,
stuff.
yeah.
We did have a question.
It's kind of two things, the complication of like social media, like how do you actually set it up so that someone could be responsible for like your Facebook page?
Well, you have to leave your login information in your will and different things so that that person can access that.
Legal things that you have to worry about, like deal with that.
We don't know they don't know that you're gone until somebody reports that you're gone.
And then the last thing before we wrap up, and then if you want to share any last words, was one thing I missed is like I have a half sibling that I've never met. You know what I'm saying? And so I forgot to put in the will who I don't
There you go.
want access
That's a
to
big one.
things, right? If that person has no impact on your life, then they could garner everything. And so you got to think about that. And so that's the time where you do want to sit down with family, ask if there's any hidden secrets that we should be knowing about.
That was
And
made for
doing it that way,
made
because
for wayward men who had.
or if you got that ex-husband or whoever who you don't want in your business, you might want to write that, you know, they get 0.
That's the great thing about
Yeah,
wills
yeah.
is that they're very specific. And as I said, when you get your estate like document, you might have a trust which you funded, and that goes this way and filters down, and that's a probate thing and what you're going to do with that. But you'll always have a will that's connected in that your estate planning documents, because people need to know where other things are going.
Tell the people how to find you.
You can find me on Facebook, Adrienne H. Billingsmith, if you ever want to. And my email is albillingssmith@gmail.com.